Each week, we like to break down the stories from three levels of government with CTV's political commentator, Scott Reid. Scott Reid is joining us live in studio, as he does every week at this time. Scott, good to see you.
Hey, bud.
All right, so let's talk about the federal government right now. Trudeau's popularity is certainly going to be put to the test again. We've already talked a lot about St. Paul's and Toronto, but we've got by-elections coming up in Manitoba and Quebec. How important are these, and are they as important or potentially as significant as what we saw last month in St. Paul's?
Well, they'll only be as significant in this so far as there could be a compounding effect. So LaSalle-Mard in Quebec, forget about the Winnipeg riding. It's going to be an NDP conservative fight. Okay. The government doesn't have stakes there. But for Trudeau, after Toronto, St. Paul, really safe Liberal riding. And what's happened since then? Nothing.
Not much, yeah.
Zero. Government hasn't changed personnel, hasn't changed direction, hasn't changed policy. Nothing has happened, frankly. And now he's going to call LaSalle-Mard. Also, what should be a pretty safe Liberal riding, but it looks like it's going to be a three-way fight with the Bloc, with the NDP and the Liberals. And they cannot afford to lose this. Why do I say that? I mean, I guess, of course they can afford to lose it. They lose it, they move on. But for Trudeau personally, if you lose a safe seat in Toronto, you lose a safe seat in Montreal, every single caucus member in that Liberal government is going to say, my God, man, there is no safe harbor for us. There is no seat that's safe. There's no thing that's safe. And they're going to increase their demands for change. So we'll have to see. Between now and then, the Prime Minister could play some cards. He can make some changes. But that's going to be a tight by-election, and it's going to be a tough test for Trudeau.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch indeed. I mean, Toronto St. Paul's was just like, that was a wake-up call, we think, but we don't know where it's going to go.
It's a wake-up call, but nobody actually got out of bed and started the coffee. Where's the wake-up?
Yeah, okay, let's talk provincially there. Here's an interesting one. You've talked about this about 5 or 6 weeks ago. The speculation ramped up about maybe we're going to see a potential early election here in Ontario, but I suppose the question is, how many ridings may there be when that happens? Because there's going to be a redrawing of the electoral boundaries to the federal level, which could match here, but that could play to Doug Ford's advantage.
So that's a big tell. Is there going to be a provincial election? Could it be as early as next summer? One thing to watch is, will Doug Ford move to change the election boundaries? Because roughly, in about 111 out of 124 seats provincially, the provincial boundaries map against the federal boundaries. They were changed. Will we see changes at the provincial level? Will Ford introduce legislation to make those changes prior to the next election? If so, and the next election is going to be in the summer of 2025, he's going to have to get that train to chugging down the tracks this fall. So that's going to be an interesting tell. But there are reasons to do it and reasons not to do it. Reasons for doing it, you get rid of a Liberal seat in downtown Toronto and Don Valley. You also maybe get a couple extra seats out in the 905 where he's going to feel pretty good about his chances of winning those seats. So it's going to be something to watch. People that are trying to peer into the looking glass and figure out whether or not Doug Ford's actually going to force an election next summer, they'll be watching to see this discussion around electoral boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, the calculus is pretty intense right now because, we saw recent poll numbers showing that Doug Ford is really in pretty good position against both Marit Stiles and, of course, Bonnie Crombie here. So if you can redistribute the seats and perhaps come out on top more, that's got to be very front of his mind.
Here's a way to look at it. If we see legislation to change the boundaries, it is a for certain slam dunk absolute that Doug Ford's calling an election next summer. If he doesn't, it just means that he's decided to hold his cards, and there may still be an election next summer, but it's not absolutely guaranteed. He won't be showing his cards. Okay,
interesting. Playing it close to the chest. Finally, let's talk about municipal politics here, Scott. Toronto, we talk about increasing violence against parking officers. They could have even more hostility on Thursday when those parking fines go up again. August 1st, all of a sudden it's $100, $600, where it used to be 50 and 75.
Some of them are going to triple. You're going to see some new fines in certain places. Now, I know that people say things like, well, you can't speak out against parking fines because these punish people who park in the wrong spot, stop in the wrong spot. Okay, fine. But I hate parking fines. I hate paying parking fines. Loathe it. So generally, I'm against it. But what can you do? It's the way of the world. The one thing I wish they'd come heavier on, I'm going to sound like Grandpa Reid here, right? These guys on their electric scooters and electric bikes bombing down the
sidewalks, yes.
I think that the fine should be $10,000. We should be allowed to take the bike, and people in the area should be allowed to hit it with a bat until the bike is left in crumbs. That's my view. City Hall needs to get on this.
Yeah, get on the roads. I've almost been taken out a couple of times just coming out from the edge of a building, blind, especially 4 o'clock in the morning when we get here. and there's people on these things whizzing by on the sidewalk completely. You might expect to bump into someone walking, but not on an e-bike.
Man yells
or scooter.
at cloud.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so, if it's a vehicle, get on the road.
Yeah.
If it's not a vehicle, get off the damn thing and walk on the sidewalk.
Get off my lawn. All right,
exactly.
Scott Reid,
Enough of this.
I always appreciate this, Scott.
See you,
Thanks so
brother.
much, man. We'll see you next week.